the risks of not being prepared in the case of an emergency. But do Christians have a responsibility to be prepared, or does it actually show a lack of faith that we would think about maybe putting food away during a time of disaster? I mean, after all, isn't God in control? Well, here to talk about this very important subject, one of the original founders of the PrEP movement, Steve Quayle. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. And this is a subject, obviously, that's near and dear to my heart, because it's indicative in both the Old Testament and New Testament that God warns His people before adversity or before even judgment comes. And as the proverb says, a wise man sees evil coming and prepares himself accordingly. That's the, I guess the Steve version. The King James says it just sees evil coming and prepares,
right.
But the point is that this crisis between people who say it shows a lack of faith, I'm just going to trust God, God will take care of me.
Right. Well, you hear that a lot.
Yeah, we hear it all the time. And I got to tell you something. I have obviously been dealing with this for a lot of decades. And I, in a matter of prayer one time, I think this is important for the people to understand, I said, Lord, why is this a conflict? And He simply said, my people don't want to take responsibility that I have charged them with and that I have equipped them with and told them what's going to come to pass. And so the conflict between is it faith or not faith? Listen, Noah moved by faith. And if Noah didn't move by faith, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
Joseph was preparing the people during the 7 years of feast for the 7 years of famine. Because of his wisdom, his whole country was saved. And not only that, but he ended up being second in command, only second to Pharaoh.
Right.
Then you get into, and here's the great one. Tom and I were talking about this earlier today, and the first prepper in the New Testament was the mother of the little boy that had the loaves of fish and bread. And I got that in prayer, Tom, because, people say, well, if you really trust Jesus, you wouldn't be doing this. You just wait for Him. Unfortunately, Joe, that mother knew that her son might be gone a little longer. And because a mother who was faithful, concerned with her child, prepared, what did Jesus do?
Right.
What only Jesus can do. This is great stuff.
Sure.
He basically multiplied the loaves and fishes, fed 5,000, there was leftovers. Here's the deal. There's plenty at the banquet table of the Lord, but if people don't prepare, it's not just about them, it's about the others. And Tom, you and I have been talking about the days of Noah and the need to prepare. Now we're faced with actually extinction-level events, and we'll address that because, again,
sure.
Joe, the word extinction doesn't mean we're all going to go and, sing Kumbaya by the fireside, you know.
Right.
So, Tom, as someone who has been articulating for the years that you've been writing the need for people to understand the days we live in, it's here, isn't it? Aren't we seeing the time that we warned about now coming to pass?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all around the world right now today. Our president's trying to work with North Korea to mitigate the threat of a nuclear war. The Middle East looks like it could break apart. We had Colonel McGinnis with us recently talking about the alliance of evil, right? This new combination between China and Russia and whether we're entering into a new Cold War. But in addition to those kind of things, it looks like Bible prophecy is also unfolding in the Middle East. You and I have done so many shows where we're talking about transhumanism and biotechnology. Your conference is coming this month, actually, in a couple of weeks from this broadcast, where we're going to be in Branson talking to experts from around the world about what are the potential existential threats against humanity as a result of biotechnology. Well, safety experts, they're staying up overnight now.
That's right.
Worried about these laboratories maybe somewhere in Iran, other places where you have these state players that are working with trying to create a biological weapon, something that could literally be torn from the pages of the book of Revelation, where it talks about boils and blains and all this stuff breaking out. So all around us are reasons that people should take time to do what they can do. Now, not everybody is like some of these millionaires and billionaires right now. They're buying these underground bomb bunkers that are all set up, so they're going to survive the apocalypse. But everybody can do something to try to be prepared. And it isn't just Bible prophecy. Look at this headline.
I saw that.
New York Magazine today, right?
Yes.
It says, this is what a nuclear bomb looks like. And then it just shows a picture of a dirty old van.
That's right.
Well, what are they saying? They're saying that, there's enough nuclear material that people could get and make a 10-kiloton bomb, essentially what we dropped on Hiroshima.
Right.
Right? And park it in a van, put it in the middle of New York, and blow it up in the street, and you would have just absolute, catastrophe.
Well, one of the things, too, that our own national security advisors are talking about, and I don't know yet what his position on this is, but one of the things we've seen pop up in the news a lot lately is an increased dialogue around an EMP. Now, right now, they just got back from the summit. All things look like maybe Kim Jong-un, at least in his case, is more willing to maybe put away some of the nuclear programs and stuff. We really don't know yet how all of that will play out, but nobody knows with Russia. We have so many enemies that I think would love to see. And for those that don't know what an EMP is, one of you guys tell me in layman's terms what that means. I have the general idea, but what it also might mean for a mass population that would wake up with every device that we use, from everything from online banking to the way we get our grocery stores, transit companies that supply food to different, grocers and outlets, all of this stuff. They use computers, they use satellite for all of this stuff, would literally just stop overnight. Now, I'm not trying to insinuate fear, but we've seen events just in the last decade where suddenly survival supplies were not available at all for months on end, and we'll talk about that in a minute because I was the former COO of SurvivorMall.com back in the day when we operated that business. But for those that don't know, EMP, how realistic is the threat and what might that look like waking up to just a situation where everything we use for everything is shut off?
Well, electromagnetic pulse, imagine when a nuclear weapon is detonated or there are specific EMP bombs, it's an intense lightning strike. I'm making this very simple.
Right.
And as people know, when lightning strikes their house, it can knock out the power. Or lightning in a severe thunderstorm can take out, or hurricane, it takes out the power lines. And what's interesting, if you look at transformers that blow up during hurricanes and stuff, that's kind of an immediate representation of an electromagnetic pulse. But then there's also something called the Carrington effect. And the Carrington effect is an intense solar storm that bombards the ionosphere, and that literally happened late 1800s. And what would be the ultimate wake-up call is, number one, nothing works that you're used to. Have any of you ever been in a power outage, and the first thing you do is go hit the light switch?
That's
and
right.
you go, why did I hit the light switch? Or for those of us that depend on, whatever this thing's called. I was trying to define a new term, but I don't want to go there for the I Spy, based on the old series. The only good thing about an EMP is that, and when I say this EMP is the ultimate reality check. Now, here's something you brought up an important point. The North Koreans are believed to have 2 satellites that basically, in low orbits, go through an orbital path over the United States. And to my knowledge, nobody in the new North Korean talks, has brought that up, at least openly. Now, they may have in the background.
Right.
But what people need to understand in any nuclear war, before the van goes off, or concurrent with the van going off, what Tom Horn was just talking about, you would go into a period of ASAT weaponry being discharged. In other words, anti-satellite weapons. And the Chinese have already detonated a couple of them, and the Russians, and everything you're seeing, Joe, you know this, they're talking about war in space. All war in space translates out into high-energy weapons being aimed at the Earth and specific Earth stations, just simply meaning any place that's command, control, and communication will be wiped out. So it's the ultimate wake-up call, but when that day happens, all of the ramifications are overwhelming. Public water won't work, the pumps don't work, sewers don't work. I mean, obviously, if you got an outhouse in the back, but there comes a point where everything comes to a standstill.
Right.
It's like the day the Earth stood still.
Right. Well, and our own U.S. government did an extensive study, at the end of which they determined that up to 95% of all Americans would be dead within 24 months following a catastrophic EMP. And that's because of everything that would be set in motion. First of all, hospitals wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to get, the store shelves would be empty literally in 1 hour.
Medications,
right?
food,
Medications, everything. But then in addition to all that, there would be widespread looting. There'd be rioting on the streets. Because you said something before the program came on about this Russian philosopher that said if food isn't crossing over the border, then armies will.
Yeah.
And that's because if people don't have the resources they think they need, they are going to go into conflict to try to take whatever resources or possession you have away from you so they can use it for themselves.
That's right.
When the PrEP movement started, most people that were just getting into it, there were a lot of things, it pretty much came into its own in the late 70s, obviously in the 60s, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But the hardest thing to overcome even then, Joe and Tom, was the fact that people were looking at preparedness as a one-time purchase. Here's a great statement. Preparedness is a mindset, a continuing education mindset, and it is not a one-time purchase. The food distribution, if you took, we've got Mountain House behind me, and let's say this, the top 4 or 5 food producers in the world.
Right.
Especially in the United States. By the way, the rest of the world doesn't have this. We have it, but I've seen it go, and I've been at this for a lot of years, 35 years. I've seen it just absolutely peak, and people can't get it. You just described 8-month waiting list, and to the point where nobody cares about it. It goes in cycles. The time to get food is now. We're seeing the growing seasons affected by so much ash, volcanic ash, and in my opinion, geoengineering of the world through weather modification, where you're seeing droughts being initialized and you're seeing floods being initialized. And by the way, defense secretaries are on record. There are 200 plus patents on weather control, but people can't put 2 and 2 together. How the food grows in the field, how the food is cultivated, how it's placed on transportation, what it costs to keep it cool energy-wise. What happens when there's none of that? See, EMP was the ultimate wake-up call. Everything shuts down. And by the way, the Deagle report took the population of the United States from 350 million, in a couple of years, 7 years, interesting, 7 years from today, they showed it would be 80 million. Well, now they boosted to 100 million. I said, where the other 20 million people have come from? Not only immigrants, but I believe that unless America repents, and I really do, and when people say repents from what, all you got to see is the headlines of the pedophiles, all of the, not only perversion, but all these things bring judgment upon a nation. God's given us space to repent and space to prepare. And Joseph, again, people have got to understand, Joseph is a type of a faithful servant. God put him as a faithful servant. Others live. If you will take the time to prepare, not for yourself, for others. Somebody said, what happens if you die, Steve, and you got all this stuff? I said, well, guess what? I've already anticipated that, and I've already made sure it gets dispersed, and by the way, already has been. You see, again, it's not a question of selfishness. It's a question of obedience. And when one man, Noah, one man, Joseph, or one woman, the mother of the little boy with the loaves of bread and fish, when somebody believes God, other people get blessed. And ladies and gentlemen, please take advantage of these offerings that Tom and Joe Horn are presenting, because, again, we've all seen the time when you can't get any of this stuff. And I commend both of you, because this is life assurance. People pay big money to die. We're asking them to take a reasonable amount of their salaries or their vacation money and live. Life assurance. You get to live to see the fruit of your labor.
Well, and one of the things we also saw in that whole event, our warehouse was sold out in one day, but we kept our prices the same. What we saw with a lot of other companies man, they were price gouging. They doubled, tripled, quadrupled the cost of buying product from them, because now there's an emergency and everybody's freaking out. And it was really sad. I mean, we sell a radiation detector, and all over Japan and people were ordering those from us, and it was sad because as they were delivered by the mail, they were already chirping when they took them out of the box. They already knew that they were in radiation.
But The wonderful part of it was many of them emailed back and were able to relocate quickly instead of just listen to the local media that they were not being exposed.
Right.
The nuke alert would actually go off. They were able to get with families and stuff, down the road, minimizing exposures to things like radiation. A lot of the fears that people have with question marks like, preparedness and what does it actually take to get prepared comes from just simply a lack of taking a real look at what it takes. And there's this built-in expectation that it's very expensive.
Right.
It's this astronomical budget that I'll never be able to afford, so they don't look. But the reality is there's a lot of stuff that people can do very inexpensively to help a lot. I'll give you one quick example in the final moments of the program. We have a DVD at the skywatchtvstore.com called Sheltering in Place. We've heard comments. It's a DVD that deals with what to do with nuclear fallout. It's very interesting. Well, see, we've heard comments from people over the years like, if I know that a nuke was to go off in my state, I'd want to be at ground zero so I can go quickly because I don't want to suffer radiation over time. But the reality is that a lot of folks will survive if they have the right tools. And some of that might look as simple as taping visqueen in your windows, barricading the doors with mattresses, hunkering down for the first few days. They say that after the first 2 days, the number of exposures to radiation drops so dramatically that then relocation is a probability. Right. So you just have to know what to do about being prepared.
Well, and it might not only be what you could do for yourself or your own home, but it's how am I going to help mom and dad survive in a situation. So the knowledge is really good. That's an award-winning documentary film, by the way, called Sheltering in Place, and it's only one of the many, many things that we make available. We're only going to do this one program, this first, of September program. In a week from now, I'm going to be with my good buddy Steve here. We're going to be at the Mansion Theater in Branson. Right. And we'll be on to other topics, of interest. But we did want to take at least 1 week to tell people this is National Preparedness Month, and they need to do what they can do. Check out, skywatchtvstore.com, and there's a section over there that says preparedness, and then there's one for long-term storage food. We sell military and police-grade gas masks, things like that.
Yep. Folks, we want you to be prepared. We've done everything we can on our end to try to help accommodate price points, budgets, and the realities of trying to be prepared through our informational DVDs and books. Please visit the skywatchtvstore.com and take advantage of the deals that we're offering. And again, thanks, Tom, for joining us today. Steve, good to have you in studio.
Always a joy.
For Tom Horn and Steve Quayle, I'm Joe Horn, and this is Skywatch TV.